I'm a big foodie, and I grew up in Bombay. Street food of Mumbai, I think, is the probably one of the earliest memories that I have growing up. There were lots of people who were thinking, why is he writing a book when he should be buying a car or a house? But went with my heart, and I figured out what it is that I want to do, and then pursued that. And I've always had a string of mentors who have guided me along the way, for which I'm very grateful. I would say bold enough to follow my curiosity and where it takes me. One thing kind of led to the other, and that's where I am right now. So I think unless you try a few things and really figure out for yourself, it's difficult to know. I think if the why is kind of cleared out, right? If you're not constantly thinking about why am I doing this, then I think you have at least some part of it sorted out. If there are things that keep you, awake during the day and not just up at night, I think that helps. I don't. I I struggle.
Wishing everyone a very warm welcome, whether you're listening uh, to the recorded or the published version of the episode, or you're joining us live. Very happy to have all of you here to yet another exciting installment of the Learning Lounge, where leaders share podcast. As the name suggests, this is a space where leaders from diverse industries, backgrounds, experiences come together to share their valuable insights and knowledge. Our hope is that through these conversations, we can grow as individuals and as leaders, drawing inspiration from our incredible guests. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Subramanian Kalpathi. I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast, Subbu. Thank you for graciously accepting this invitation to share your journey, your life lessons, and your experiences with us. We are very excited to have you here and look forward to an enriching conversation. Before I fire my questions towards you, I'd like to give a little bit that I know about you. Um, Subbu is a global leader of learner experience and advisory for talent development at DXC Technology. He's responsible for enabling learning for DXC's 130,000 employees across the globe. Before joining DXC, he took several talent consulting roles with organizations such as EY, Nolscape, gaining a decade of experience in talent management, leadership development, organizational development, employer branding, employee engagement, and more. In addition to his role as an ICF credentialed coach, Subbu has had a fascinating career journey over 17 years. He's led technical training programs at Infosys, handled marketing and business development at Invesco Asset Management, and even set up investment advisory at the JLL, just to name a few of diverse things that Subbu has done. What's more, Subbu is the founder and host of Culture Matters, a top-rated podcast at Amazon, where he chats with thought leaders about latest trends in organizational culture and its influence on today's workplace. He's also the author of the book called as The Millennials. Again, it's an Amazon chart-topping book where he dives into the dreams, challenges, motivations of this fast-moving generation. Uh, Being a millennial himself, he's very passionate about applying behavioral sciences to improve talent outcomes that truly shines through everything he does. On a personal note, Subbu loves to research and is engaged with continuous learning that has led him down some interesting paths. He's even picked up some improv. We will talk about it in our podcast in a short while along the way that he's applied at work. And we'll be very curious to learn more about that, Subbu. He is a member of the International Association of Facilitators and also the International Coaching Federation, which really speaks through his commitment to foster growth and development at his workplace. So happy to have you here, Subbu. Hope you enjoyed the conversation too.
Thank you so much, Shanti. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thanks for laying out my background also in such detail. Thank you.
Most welcome. So the format is simple. I'll ask questions. Sometimes I'll give you all the time that you need, and sometimes I'll say, okay, you have 30 seconds to answer. Yeah. So we will start with a short 30 seconds to answer questions that will help us get to know you a little bit more, Subbu. To start with, what's your favorite childhood memory?
Oh, my favorite childhood memory. So I'm a big foodie, and I grew up in Bombay. And I know I love eating the street food in Bombay. So my favorite earliest memories are going down the road and getting into these gullies. Sion is where I was brought up, right? So it's not called they call pani puri, not golgappa in Bombay. So eating pani puris and having that bhel puri, sev puri, what have you. So the street food of Mumbai, I think, is the probably one of the earliest memories that I have growing up.
Lovely. I've known Pani Puri, say Golgappa, Puchka.
Yeah,
Uh, so many names it has, and all of those versions are so wonderful.
yeah.
With you, that one. Um, what's been a proud moment of your life, and why does it stand out for you?
I think one thing that I'm really proud of is the book, as you mentioned, when the book was published. And I had an opportunity to write at a very early age and got published at an early age in life. So that was a proud moment for me because, there were lots of people who were thinking, why is he writing a book when he should be buying a car or a house? But, I kind of, went with my heart and I figured out what it is that I want to do and then pursued that. So when the book was finally published and it kind of came to my hand, I think that was I would say one of the proud moments of my life.
Indeed, a moment to be proud of. So, Subbu, if you had a personal slogan or motto, what would it be and why?
So in the context of my work, and since you mentioned that, I have a personal motto that I live by, which is helping good people become better at what they do, and I put that caveat of good people right up front, right? Because I don't want to work with anyone and everyone, because it has to be aligned with my values in terms of whatever it is that I'm doing. So whether it's being a coach, or whether it's developing leaders, or whether it's talent management, etc., helping good people become better at what they do is me figure out whether it's the is it something that's worthwhile. That kind of helps me like a north star. So I did that exercise some time ago where I listed down what's really important to me and came up with this kind of one liner.
Lovely, lovely. And since you said you work with only good people and you're working with me, I can consider I'm in that list of good.
Yes, you're on the list, Shanti.
Thank you. What's one hobby or activity that you love that most people wouldn't expect you to be engaging with?
Well, I'll just tell you what I like. I've picked up quite a few things along the way. I Something that I really like doing is I go for these bird watching tours. Here in Bangalore, where I stay, there are a few groups that take you on early mornings on Saturdays and Sundays. Sometimes on Saturdays, I don't try. I don't have an opportunity to go every weekend, but I try to go at least whenever I get the opportunity, maybe once a month or whatever. Being in nature, listening to birds, watching them, identifying them, getting to know a little bit about them is something that I really love doing.
What's one or what's the most unusual job or career path that you've ever had?
Um, it's not a, I wouldn't say it's a, it's not, since you mentioned the word unusual, it wasn't a, career decision per se. So I can share with you. So my my neighbors in Bombay, where I grew up, they own a canteen at this place called the Shanmukhanand Hall. It's one of the biggest auditoriums in India, in Asia, I think. So they own the canteen there, and when I was growing up, I would go and help them out in the canteen because I wanted to have their batata vada and samosa. So I would actually stand in the counter and sell ice cream or what have you, right? Just for fun, for nothing else. And I knew the payoff at the end of those 2 hours was getting that hot batata vada or samosa. I don't know what life skills it taught me. Maybe patience, because when those huge crowds come at in the middle of a live performance and they're very hungry, they want to have their garam chai and samosa. You have to be very patient and make sure that you're serving them well. So that taught me some interesting life skills. I don't know what exactly, but I'm sure it taught me something.
I'm sure, I'm sure. I think we all learn from almost everything that we do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Lovely. The next set of questions, Subbu, are around your career journey. As we were talking, you did mention your entire career spans through marketing, business development, people development and whatnot. How did you navigate through these diverse career shifts? And, what was that thing that influenced you to go in all these directions?
Sure. So I think for the most part, I have been I've gone with my heart. I think early career you are influenced by your parents and the people around you. So like any good middle class urban child, I did my engineering and I did my MBA. And then I think I kind of started immersing myself into different kinds of roles. Right. So my early career was spent with Infosys, where I, instead of getting into a typical engineering kind of profile, I got into a learning and development facilitation kind of profile, training profile. And that was those early days influenced me a lot, because I knew that yeah, in school and college public speaking was a strength of mine, and I thought, how do I take this strength and apply it at work? Right. And training seemed to be an opportunity where you're not just speaking, but then you're also helping people learn and educating them. So that was an early influence that stayed with me in my career. And it kind of over a period of time I kept coming back to it in different forms or the other. So I immersed myself into technical roles at Infosys, and I immersed myself into marketing and finance business development kind of roles post my MBA, as you mentioned. But then my heart was always I think towards people development. I tried to come back to it as much as I could. So while I did my engineering and then I did my MBA, I came back to roles that kind of appealed to me. That's how I got into roles related to people development, talent management, employee engagement, culture, etc. So none of this was planned. I basically put myself out there to see what's available, spend time talking to people, understanding roles, and then trusted others to kind of pull me in the right direction. So that's how it's been, and I've always had a string of mentors who have guided me along the way, for which I'm very grateful. So that's in a nutshell, Shanti, about how things have panned out.
What nudged you to move from engineering to careers that are connected with people, so closely connected with people?
Hmm. I think because again, at an early age, as I was saying, I used to interact with people, but not in the way that you see in the corporate world, right? So, for instance, in school, you get to speak at elocution competitions, for example, and you realize that I realized that that was a strength of mine, that I was able to connect with people and relate with people when I was speaking. So while I did my engineering and I was a good student, I think I got all my marks and grades well, and the teachers were all happy. While I was doing that, I also realized that something was missing. Right. So again, going back to the early opportunity at Infosys, it tried to also help me keep in touch with my elocution abilities while at the same time training people on technical skills. So both of them kind of came together quite well. And I think that was like a crucible experience of me for me very early in my career, where I realized that, hey, I actually enjoy being with 25, 50 people in a room, wherein I'm helping them gain insights, helping them figure out what. And that kind of opened the door for me into various other things, right? So when you get into HR, for instance, you realize that it's not just about training and development. There's a whole lot more, like coaching, for instance, is an avenue, culture building exercises, employee engagement, and then there is also the science of it, right? Which is your diagnostics, the OD part of it. So all of those kind of, I got into this rabbit hole, if you may, where I tried to figure out, what next and what more. And one after the other, I kind of, realized that there are these other opportunities that are available in which you can make a difference, right? And that I think also contributed to my growth. I was I would say bold enough to follow my curiosity and see where it takes me, right? And one thing kind of led to the other, and that's where I am right now.
How beautiful. Contributing to others' growth led to your own growth. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So, Subbu, now let's talk a little bit about your book, The Millennials. It was a significant endeavor. What gave you the idea that you want to write on this topic?
Mm. So I think I'm a millennial, as you and I have spoken before, and I come from the generation. So there were a few things that were going on. This was, I'm talking about 10 years ago, when the book wasn't published. In fact, just last month I finished 8 years of publishing the book. So about 10 to 11 years ago, when I started researching on the idea, I was already writing and I was getting published for newspapers and magazines, etc. I was already on the path of writing, and I was and this topic was kind of front and center. It wasn't all out, generations, etc. weren't being talked about as much as they do today. But at that point in time, it was a nascent topic, where some people in some domains were talking about it, and I realized there is not enough research around the topic within the Indian context, right? So the idea was to, can I do some primary research to find out how are millennials, for example, since that was the topic of the day at that point, how are millennials in India, what motivates a millennial in the organization? So this is all in the organizational context, right? So how do what do millennials look for in a job? What do they look for, as far as a career is concerned? What motivates them? What do millennial leaders look like? So a lot of the CEOs of startups today that have grown over the last decade or so, they were very young at that point in time, right? So they were very, very young, and they were being funded, and lots of money coming in, and it was kind of unheard of at that point in time. So it was a topic that was, I would say, waiting to be researched, and a few things happened. I got into, I started talking to people, to academics, to economists, to researchers, find out what else is happening around the world. And I realized that, there wasn't enough material available on this particular topic. So it was a gap area. And that led me to, work on the topic. I think one very important catalyst for me was the fact that I come from the generation myself, and that was a huge catalyst for me, because I felt that there is also a lived experience there that I can share with others. It's not just about me going out and researching a third party, or but I could relate a lot to the topic. So it was also very personal to me, and I thought, let me kind of help bring a nuanced view of what this generation wants and what it needs, etc. So that was the trigger, I would say, Shanti, which is figuring out what the research is. Is it I like to call it the ikigai of writing. So one is, what are you passionate about? Two, is there a market for it? And three, will you get paid for it? Right. So I kind of found my ikigai in the topic of millennials, and all three kind of came together at that point.
Brilliant. You seem to have done enough research on this topic before you got down to writing. Did that research reveal anything that stood out for you, that was like, that doesn't seem to be what I thought millennials do, how they behave? Anything that emerged?
Yeah, I think what happened was, there is this self-fulfilling prophecy, which is that, if you feel that a generation is a particular way, that's what you tend to see, right? So there's a kind of a confirmation bias that happens, and that was going on a lot. I think it still happens today, where you feel that, हमारे ज़माने में ऐसा होता था, today it happens like this kind of thing. If that is always there, then that kind of blurs your lenses, if you may. It applies a filter to the way that you look at the world, and that was happening a lot. And I think it was the book kind of unveiled a lot of things through these stories, through the anecdotes, through the research also, right? There's a lot of secondary research that I also piggybacked on, where busts. There was a lot of myth busting that was happening, that there's not enough innovation happening, for example, in the startup ecosystem. That was not true. I think there was a lot of innovation that was going on, and when I went out and spoke to these founders, spoke to the people who work in these organizations and how they are growing their organizations, I think that was one. Just to give you one example of what emerged, right? On the motivation side, so I looked at the self-determination theory of motivation, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And the hypothesis I wanted to test was, are there founders who give autonomy to their people? And does that help them get their people to be better engaged? And the demographic of many of these startups, for instance, that I profiled, is that there's not much of an age gap between the founder, the next line, and then the people who work. So they're pretty much homogeneous in the way that they function. So for somebody who's coming and looking from the outside, and it seems like, oh, this is completely out of whack. What are they even trying to do? But when you see it from their lens, all of it makes sense, right? So a lot of it is par for the course. So I saw that happening a lot, not just in smaller organizations, but also bigger organizations were kind of taking the cue and try to build that. But of course, there was a difference between how small organizations approach engaging their people versus how large organizations do it, because of the fact that there is a demographic difference from a generational perspective. Right. So if you have a, let's say if you have a 100+ year old company and things have been happening in a certain way in that organization for whatever number of years, you can't expect that to change overnight just because a new generation is coming into the but just because you've hired 100 people from campus doesn't mean that things will change overnight. But if you look at it from those same 100 people joining startups, for instance, they work in a very different kind of an environment, right? So those kind of nuances kind of stood out for me. I can keep talking about this, but
I
yeah,
can see
top of
that.
mind things, yeah. Yeah.
Lovely, lovely. Um, to me, it looks like it's more of a project, more than just writing the book.
Yeah,
Can you unpack this for us? Share how you approach the entire process of writing.
sure. So I think it's a very collaborative effort. A lot of us feel that, especially nonfiction kind of writing, it's a very collaborative effort. You're not in a vacuum, just shut down in a room and just writing, coming up with thoughts and ideas and putting it down on paper. Part of it is that, but not all of it. A lot of the work involves talking to people, talking to experts, talking to fellow consultants who are in the industry, talking to leaders. So my journey essentially started there, where all I did was I just dipped my feet into the water to see what the temperature is looking like, and that in itself took at least a couple of months. So where I spoke to so it's like, if I were to give you an analogy, it's like building a business case for a rollout of a project within an organization, right? Because you need to do your research to find out if there is any viability and if this project is feasible in the first place, and is there a market for it, right? So a lot of work went into that, which is building the business case about why this topic is important and why now, which required a lot of legwork and talking to people and putting together testimonials, putting together a proposal of what the book is about. So that was, as consultants typically do, you have to first write a proposal, pitch your idea, and see if that falls well, if that lands well, and if publishers will come on board to buy your idea, right? So that was essentially the starting point, very similar to pitching a project to a client. That's the analogy that I basically started with. And then the second part of it, once the project has been accepted, once the client lets you in, then it's essentially all about delivery, right? So making sure that whatever you've promised in the proposal is actually delivered on the ground. So you put together a project plan, you make sure that you get your case studies in place, your primary research, secondary research. A lot of the structuring of the book is important, in the way that you structure your chapters, right? So because there is continuity, right? So what may go in as content can be different. It will be different for each chapter, but then the way that chapter itself looks, there has to be some sense of continuity in terms of how it looks. So the way that I built it, for instance, is that the first half of the chapter was all about talking about the theory itself, right? So motivation, for instance, that's the first chapter of the book. What is intrinsic motivation? What is extrinsic motivation? How do these two differ? What's the research on the topic? So that was the first part of the chapter, where I was explaining what it is. And then the second half of the chapter is all about building those case studies, right? So how are organizations doing it? How does it happen in real life? And that's the practitioner's view. And this was the structure that was built, largely, just to give a frame of reference. This is how the structure was built, and then it was just rinse repeat, which is basically, the chapter on innovation, for instance, was built on the same structure. To start with, talking about how does innovation work today in a digital economy, and then give some examples, case studies, real life examples of how organizations, individuals, corporate. So I looked at three kinds of organizations: startups, as I was saying, large organizations, established ones, and then NGOs, which is also social sector kind of organizations, and how do they function, right? So that was the one part of it, right? The theory plus examples,
Yeah.
and then looking at all of these different kinds of organizations. So that's how it was. Once you have the structure in place, then it's a matter of making sure that you're executing and you're actually producing week on week, month on month. I had about a year to get the entire book published, so I basically worked to a plan, made sure that it was brought out in that year's time frame.
Yeah, I'm sure it's lots of hard work, diligence, persistence to get a book out. Thank you.
Yeah.
What would be your word of advice for someone who's aspiring to be an author right now?
Sure. I think what happened was one of the beautiful things that happened, Shanti, as a result of writing the book was I got to lots of people would come to me asking for advice on how to write, how to publish. And then I became this funnel to publishing houses where I started, directing them. Once you have this idea, go speak to this person. So it was a lot of personal mentoring that happened along the way, which I didn't account for. I didn't think that would happen. And it's been very satisfying, right? Where through this process in the last 8 years, I personally know of people who've got published, through, and I shared a little bit of my learning with them. So that's something that was really beautiful. So I would say first advice is pick something that you're passionate about, because as I was just saying, it's a lot of hard work, and you need to be able to stick with it for that period of time. There will be ups and downs. There will be challenges along the way. There will be more than enough challenges along the way. So therefore, it has to be something that you're passionate about, right? Otherwise, you won't be able to sustain the energy required. Then the other piece was, as I was telling you, which is the ikigai, which is look at passion is just one thing, but then really figure out if there's a market for it. Like any other endeavor that you do, you need to be able to pitch it to somebody who will buy it from you, unless you're self-publishing, which is perfectly fine. But if you're seriously considering writing, if you want to go with a good publishing house, you need to do the legwork to figure out why this matters right now, who's your target audience, how are you going to sell it. So a lot of the business part of it, which is why will this land well and why should the publishing house take you seriously, that part is also important, where you also look at the hat of how are you going to help build a market for this, right? And then through that process, of course, you're successful, hopefully, and it all works out, and that helps helps you take it forward. And I would also probably add one other thing is that try to talk to people as much as you can. I think that also helps, because sometimes we feel in our head that, oh, this is a fantastic idea right now, I want to pursue. But then when you get feedback from five other people, you also realize, hey, this may not be as so that's a very tough decision to make, even for me as a writer, where sometimes I just run with ideas and then I get real hard feedback from my editor, from my other people that I talk to when I go for advice on topics, whether I should research on this, whether I should not. I get some very clear direction on what to do and what not to do. So have that group of mentors who can guide you. I think that's another big piece.
Lovely. Thank you for the tips, Subbu. You are a millennial. You've done so much of research, enough to write a book. So what will be your advice to fellow millennials?
So I I don't profess to know a lot about where to each one's own, right? So whatever you heard of me is my journey. I'm sure you have yours. But I can just share what has helped for me is that I have a multi-generational pool of mentors. It's not, and that really helps me grow my horizon. So I have people who are much senior to me who I go to for advice. I speak to people right now in my organization, for example. I have Gen Zs who report into me, and I completely fall back on them for certain other pieces of advice, right? So I listen very keenly. That really helps build your worldview, and you don't feel that you're stuck in a rut, and that really helps open up your mind. I think that is important, because suddenly you feel most of these things happen all of a sudden. I'm approaching, actually, I have crossed midlife, right? And you realize that you're not in it anymore. That's a very scary feeling to have. So it's important to be in touch with people who are not just from your generation, but also also expand your worldview. And I think the other piece I would say is that one other thing that I also figured when I was writing the book is that today opportunities exist to grow and shape your career that probably didn't exist for my parents. I think that's a hard reality. So for which I think we should all be very grateful. Right. And then we should therefore look at opportunities to grow and shape our careers, own our careers in a way that, makes yourself proud, right? Since you asked me that question, that's something that you should do for yourself. And I think now is the time for you to be bold and be deliberate in your choices, whatever it may be, right? So that's the only other piece I would say.
Yeah, totally agree. Yes, there is lots of uncertainty that
Mm.
when I was younger, didn't face those uncertainties as much as kids today face. At the same time, the amount of opportunities is equally high. So it's
Yeah.
about that right balance. Yes, learn to deal with uncertainties and encash on those opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay, let's lighten up the mood a little bit, Subbu, and some lighter questions. What's one book or movie that has had a big impact on you and why?
A book that I really enjoyed reading was it's a tough question because I like to read, and at any given point in time, there's a book that's always top of my mind. So I'll give you two answers to that question, Shanti. Top of mind book, which I think I should definitely talk about, is this book called Bittersweet
Mm.
by Susan Cain. Absolutely amazing. I think it's probably the most original piece of work I have read in a long, long time.
Mm.
It's about how we don't incorporate enough bittersweetness in our life. So it's all about strength. It's all about positivity, all of that, happiness, blah blah. But the point Susan makes in the book is that the other side of it, which is the melancholy, the how do we talk bravely and also help each other out and really bring some of those ideas to the fore. I think that's what the book is about, and it really hit me like a ton of bricks because I don't think we have this culture of where we talk about difficult things with respect to people, for example.
Yeah.
I think there is a huge opportunity there. Well-being is kind of an offshoot of that, right? Where so that I think was something that I really enjoyed because I just read it a couple of months ago and it stayed top of mind. An evergreen book that I really recommend to everybody is this book by David Epstein called Range, which talks about how do you think about your career not just from a unidirectional deep lens but also a wide lens, which is how do you build yourself as a generalist and not just as a specialist. I think that's what the book is about. So I would probably say these two. Again, I can give you a whole list, but I'll just
Okay.
stop at that. Yeah.
Yeah, we will dig a little bit deeper on that David Epstein's book and
Yeah.
the philosophy that seems to have influenced your career trajectory. Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more about how the book has influenced your career journey.
Sure. So I think the book came to me a little later in life. It wasn't that I read the book much a long time ago, and it was recently. I think as recent as about 6 or 7 years ago. So it's not like I was very early in my career when I started reading the book. But what resonated with me is that I hadn't taken a very specialist approach to my career. Right now, you can argue that I'm a bit of a specialist, but at least until about 7 to 8 years ago, I wasn't, very, very super specialized in whatever I was doing. And that kind of arc, the career arc or the story, if you may, was very clearly laid out in the book by David Epstein. And what he says in the book is that, we feel that, all of these great musicians, great artists, great sports players, they figure out what they want to do very early in life, 6 years, 7 years of age. Of course, there are stories like that, which is true. But there's also the other side of things where you have great sports people, great musicians who have uh, played a range of sports, played a range of instruments, and then they have kind of decided on taking up one, maybe the cello or the violin or what have you. Right. So what he says in the book is that don't cut yourself short too soon. Give yourself the time and the space to try out many things, and then you will hopefully land at a place where that you enjoy. I probably take it a step further where I feel that it's again there's no real rule as such, right? I think the best of the CEOs, for example, if you say have a range of experiences, they might not be masters in all of the domains, and they hire the best people to work across all of those domains. But they have a good idea of what marketing means, what finance means, what HR means, and they're always constantly learning and updating their skills across each of these areas. So that I think is a very powerful message in the book, which speaks about having a range of experiences that help you shape your career.
Dylan, this seems like the yarn I used to give my kids when they were young.
Hmm.
It's a good try. Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't like it, you can quit taekwondo, you can quit chess, you can quit whatever
exactly.
you're learning. That's okay, but at least go try it so that you
Yeah,
figure out what you like. Brilliant. Thank you.
yeah.
Next question. If you were to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice at the start of your career, what would it be?
Um, I would say uh, I would say don't always listen to everybody all the time because everybody has pieces of advice to give you for your career. I remember, me getting free advice from people in my school, for instance. In hindsight, I have no idea, right? So people usually ask you, right, what do you want to do when you grow up? Who knows? I mean, some people are very clear, which is good for them, but I had absolutely no clue what I wanted to be when I was growing up. So I think unless you try a few things and really figure out for yourself, it's difficult to know.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Who's been that one person who's been very influential in your life? And what have they taught you?
Um, that's a tough question. I've had many people who have influenced me in so many ways. Some of them are even, not even visible. It's kind of subconscious. But I think I would probably say that my teachers from school. This one teacher I remember. She's now the principal of my school, and she's retiring this year. She would always nudge me to, get into things that I didn't want to. Where she would push me out of my comfort zone. I think those early experiences again stayed with me. I can say that in hindsight now, but I think maybe that kind of shaped my thinking. I don't know. But I distinctly remember she was the one who would, push me into these elocution competitions, get me outside of the school, saying that get out and put yourself out there. Right. So she would do that. So I think some people help spot your potential that even you can't see for yourself. I think you should really hold on to such people.
Totally agree. Yeah, I can recollect some people who've nudged me out of the comfort zone, and I thank them now.
Yeah.
But at that point in time, it's not comfortable. It's like I don't even want to see you. Totally agree.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
What's that one life lesson that you've learned the hard way?
Huh. I think you should take care of yourself. I think that's a very important life lesson. There's no, I mean, if you feel that there are 10 people looking out for you, there is not. I think you should be the first champion of you, and that's a very important lesson because when you're, especially when you're young and you're putting yourself out there, you tend to overstretch or overcompensate, right? Because you don't know enough and because you're learning. So it's important that and I did that. I think I because I was in consulting for so many years, I kind of paid the price by getting burnt out every once in a while or stretching myself too thin. I learned that the hard way. I think it's important that you strike the right balance of well-being and that stretch that you need. The stretch is important. I don't think you can do without it. That's very, very important for your growth. But at the same time, don't compromise on your well-being. I think that's very important. So a lot of that self-awareness gets built over time. You're not aware of that piece right in the beginning. But I think today the story is also changed a little, right? So where I think the Gen Z is far more aware of some of these things than at least I ever was. So yeah.
Totally agree. What's that one thing that you've tried, you failed, but you're glad you tried?
Oh, there's so much failure. So I don't know where to even start that. I think um I failed very miserably in sports. I think when I was young, I'm not naturally built for sports. Now I run and I go to the gym and I try to take care of myself, of my physical health. But as I was growing up, I was not proficient in sport at all, and I was very aware of it. But but I still wanted to. Again, it is just I don't know, probably a personality trait. I wanted to go play cricket, for instance, right? And I enrolled at a cricket academy and against the advice of some loved ones. But then I failed miserably. Right, I wasn't a good cricketer at all. So I went and tried the next big thing, next best thing, which is umpiring. So and I was good at umpiring. So
Okay.
I became the umpire everybody liked, which was fantastic. It worked for me also. So I was always involved, but not in the sport itself. So I still got to spend time with my friends.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So now let's look at your the other thing that you do, which is the Culture Matters podcast that you launched last year,
Mhm.
which delves into topics like toxic culture and burnout. What inspired you to start this podcast?
Sure. I think there are two ways to look at it. One is, of course, the topics that you spoke about, right, which is culture, etc. The other piece is I also look at it as an investment into my own learning, because when I was researching how to run a podcast, for example, I had no clue. I just saw other people who were doing it, and I reached out to them and I asked them, "How do you do this? Can you teach me?" and Shubham, he's a good friend now. So he invited me on a podcast, and I asked him, how are you doing this? I want to do this, and he was kind enough to kind of teach me. So the microphone that you see was recommended by him. So it's kind of an investment into my own learning, where through figuring out how to run a podcast, now I have built for myself a new set of skills. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that I get to learn from all of these experts who are the best in their own domains, and I get to reach out to people, and I read the work of these subject matter experts and then ask them questions. And I think it's also selfish because it kind of broadens my perspective, and I get to share it with others, right? So that's how I look at it. And then of course the topic is incidental, which is that culture is something that's been very close to my heart. As I was saying, early experiences of being stretched too thin, etc. And not just me, I think I've also heard from earlier generations, seniors that I have spoken to, who keep saying that I was burnt out on both ends. I didn't even know what that meant. So which means that we've all kind of paid the price of some of this overstretching that has happened. So I thought, let's talk about it. Let's talk to experts. Let's find out what's going on. And there is so much good material out there of research that others are doing. So it was kind of my small endeavor to not just learn from them, but also create a platform that helps amplify their voices and then share it with everybody else. So that's how the podcast was born, I think about a year ago. It's been a year and a half now. And I'm just launching season 3 tomorrow, day after. So that's also
Awesome.
coming up now. Yeah.
Yeah, and Subbu, you'd be okay if I ask you to share the link to your podcast as we share the recording of this one
Yes.
for people to listen in. Thank you.
Yes.
So Subbu, in your introduction, we spoke about improv theater. Before I ask you questions on that, for the benefit of the audience, what does improv theater actually mean?
Sure. So I think improv is, if you've seen the show Whose Line Is It Anyway, some of us may be old enough to recollect it. It used to come on Star World. It's basically performing to an audience without a script, right? So you have at a very basic level some topics identified, and then there is a cue given. Yeah, there are different ways in which you can play improv, but at a very simple level, that's what it is. So on TV, it used to come as this show called Whose Line Is It Anyway, where you have this troupe of improvisers coming and making up scenes on various topics on the spot. Although the TV version of it is a little scripted, it's not fully improvised, because just to make sure that it's recorded well, they do a little bit of that. But then if you see it on theater, most of the theater versions of improv are non-scripted, which means that you have to you basically improvise a scene on the spot with a group of other improvisers, and then you build on top of it, right? So, and there are short form improv, they call them games, short form improv games or long form improv games. And it can also be a full theater set where you have, let's say, 3 + 3 6 scenes with an interval going on for 30 minutes, and it's fully improvised. It's fascinating, right? So that's what improv is, where everything is made up on the spot, and you have this group of improvisers who come on stage and perform to a live audience.
Yeah, and I understand you integrate improv theater into the work that you do.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Sure. I think in improv, unlike stand-up comedy, which I think most people would be familiar with, it's all about the group in improv. It's never about the individual, right? So where stand-up comedy, the analogy is that you stand on stage and you're delivering lines based on a script, right? Which is what most of our leaders do. Improv is about being in the moment, being with your team, and contributing with your team, and your presence there is just one among the team, right? So it calls for a certain set of skills, which is not typical of theater or stand-up comedy. So for instance, stand-up comedy, maybe if you're interacting with your audience, you may have to listen to what they're saying and then come up with a funny line, but that's only a part of it. Most of it is scripted. And same thing with theater is fully scripted, right? You just come and deliver your lines, make sure that you're listening. But here the listening is 10x, right? You have to be listening very, very keenly to be able to come up with your next line, because it has to make sense in the context of what is going on at that point in time.
Make sense to others who are playing along with you. Wow.
Exactly. So you're building on everything on the spot, and you're doing it with others. You're not doing it alone. So it makes it that much more challenging. And I think that I think translates very well into an organizational context, right? Because this is exactly what we see as challenges, which is that we want the group to be working well, we want the unit to be working well, and that's what OD is all about. where you work with these intact teams or cross-functional teams, and how do we make sure that the sum is greater than the individual parts, right? Those are some of the questions that we usually grapple with. Improv works very well in those kind of contexts, right? So it's never about you. How do you keep your ego aside, and how do you make sure that it is about the unit? It's easy to come up with your opinions, but then unless you're listening very well, you won't be able to layer on the context of what's going on in your team, or what's going on within the setup. So from a leadership development standpoint, from a team engagement standpoint, from a lot of those constructs that we work with, I think improv works very, very well. It really challenges and pushes you out of your comfort zone, because at initially you think that, hey, I know this, I'm listening all the time, but then not in the way that improv demands you to do. So it really makes you very, very uncomfortable the first time that you try it. And then then your mind kind of opens up to this whole world of possibilities that you didn't think existed. Right. So to your listeners, I invite them to also try out maybe an improv workshop if you can. Right. And you will know what I'm talking about. It's one thing to talk about it, and it's something else to experience it altogether.
Indeed. Curious, Subbu, how about leaders who've never engaged with improv, who've never done theater, never done stage performances, and you're asking them to engage in something so uncomfortable?
Yeah.
How do they react to it?
I've done workshops, Shanti, in my consulting. When I was consulting, it's a lot of fun. So most leaders are open to it because by virtue of being a leader, I think that curiosity is inherent in you, and they are, of course, they are nervous and anxious about, I don't know what this is. Right, and some people take to it a lot more than some people are like fish in the water, some people are a fish out of the water. So you see both kinds of this thing. But in my experience, they take to it really, really well. And especially if you get the debrief right, which is making sure that why we are doing and why it matters, that part of it, if you get it right, then the aha moments really click. Right, especially so learning principles, where if you're having fun, if you're being in the moment. So improv is like that. While it is challenging, if the context is set very well, which is that we are going to have a little bit of fun, and through that process we are going to learn something. If it is kind of contextualized and set it up that way, then it becomes very interesting for leaders to explore. And but bite sized. I wouldn't say just don't go all in. Right, maybe do a half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hour kind of, at least 2 to 3 hours kind of an immersion to see how it is, and then maybe build on it is what I would suggest.
Brilliant. So, Subbu, you're a podcaster, you're an author, you're a professional, you have a family, you have to take care of yourself. How do you balance all of this?
I don't. I I struggle. I struggle a lot. It's not easy. I hope I had a straight a very sophisticated answer for that, but I don't. It's always a struggle. But I try. I think like most of us, I try to, at least these days, as I realize I'm growing older, I try to put my well-being front and center of everything else, be it with my sleep or my exercise or food. Food is still a struggle because I like to eat. So that's still a bit of a struggle.
Golgappas come in your way?
Sorry.
Golgappas come in your way?
Golgappas and pani puris always come in my way. Every time I go to Bombay, I have to. So that's that's a bit of a problem. But I think what also helps is infusing some meaning into your work. I think if the why is kind of cleared out, right? If you're not constantly thinking about why am I doing this, then I think you have at least some part of it sorted out, right? If that is always at the back of your mind, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Then I think there is there's something to be worked on there. I used to be in that stage for a long time. Thankfully, I'm at least partly out of it. I'm not fully there, but I think that helps, right? If you can derive some bit of meaning in what you're doing, then I think it helps. And as also you were saying earlier, Shanti, so it's all about those projects, right? So I like to think about a string of projects that I'm working on, and these portfolio of projects have to be exciting for me. Maybe not all of them, at least about 70% of them, if they're exciting for me, and not all of them may be yielding anything right now, right? Some of them may be long-term projects. I think that's beneficial, at least for me. That's how I look at it. Whether it's the podcasting, for instance, or reading or writing or researching or working in an organization. Of course, I also have a full-time job, right? So if there are things that keep you awake during the day and not just up at night, but also awake during the day, I think that helps.
What's that one project on the horizon that you're looking forward to?
I am re-releasing my podcast, as I was telling you. So that's happening as of this week. So I'm really looking forward to that. I had taken a pause because of some, personal personal emergencies at home. But that is kind of okay now, kind of stabilized. So I'm looking forward to releasing the podcast now, season 3. So that's really on the horizon. Something that I'm looking forward to. Personally, I also want to finish. A 10K run this year, meaning have finish it in an hour. So that's personal goal that I have, because I turned 40 this year, and it's just these things. Again, it doesn't make too much of sense, but it's just a personal goal that I have, that I want to keep
That's
myself
what
fit as
matters.
as I go forward. So yes.
Lovely. So Subbu, I know about your passion about playing the guitar. Um, how has playing the guitar changed you, modified you, influenced you?
I think, I mean, I just enjoy listening to music. And I was, introduced to different kinds of music over a period of time. And playing the guitar also introduced me to music that I hadn't heard before, because my teacher who taught me the guitar as I was growing up, he used to listen to a lot of classic rock and, that kind of stuff, which I hadn't been introduced to from my circle of people that I knew. So I think that kind of listening to new kinds of music, I think stretches. I wouldn't say stretches, but it also engages you in different ways, in new and exciting ways, and it's a good feeling to have. That's on the purely from an enjoyment, perspective, but also from a skill development perspective. I think it also keeps the right side of my brain, just to give a metaphor, like the creative part of my brain, it keeps that active, right? And I think it's a good skill to build on. I got back to playing the guitar after a while this year. I had taken a break. So yeah.
Can we hear a small piece?
Sure. Let me see if I can play something for you. Just give me one sec. Move this. Just let me know if you can hear it. I'm going to just adjust my. Not see my entire guitar though. Audible? Okay, great.
Yes.
So this is a song by Pink Floyd. If any of your listeners listen to classic rock, they may be familiar with this. So I'm just going to play the initial intro of it and see how that goes. It's called "Wish You Were Here." Then it goes on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I would have loved to end it here on that musical note, but I don't want to rob the audience of the opportunity to ask you questions. Let's see if there are any questions in the audience. People, any questions for Subbu? Otherwise, I have a couple more that I will be very happy to share.
Yeah, I would like to ask a question. That's okay.
Yes.
Before that, very interesting. It was nice listening to you, Subbu. Very interesting anecdotes. Two things that I really liked the most was how you enjoyed being an umpire than being, the player. That was a very interesting twist that not many of us get to experience. Kudos to have even accomplished that. And I like that quote that you specifically mentioned, that your job should not keep you awake during the night, but most importantly, awake during the day, so that you feel lively and want to do more. Very interesting and lovely takeaway from my side. One question is with regard to the improv theatre. I love theater. I'm a dancer by passion,
Okay.
classical dancer. I dance Bharatanatyam, and of course, any form of dance interests me. So I've done a few workshops on improv theater, and I love all of those aspects. As a facilitator, which is my profession, I would like to understand, are there some specific areas where you would think improv theater works best? Are there some specific topics or themes, or are there certain things that I need to keep in mind while considering using improv theater or integrating improv theater in facilitation? That's my question to you.
Sure. So I think first of all, thank you. Thanks that the messages were able to resonate. On your, I think the first part of your question, where does it work well? Maybe I'll start with there and add on how to integrate it better with facilitation. I think I have found that it works really well for simple aspects of people development, which is things like communication skills, team building, collaboration, either for intact teams or for cross-functional teams, either of them. I think it works very well. It works well for middle to senior leaders also, as much as it does for folks who are younger. Folks who are younger, they take to it very, very well. I have seen very interestingly, also senior folks taking it to it very, very well, because what happens is when you bring improv as a tool to senior folks, right? They have a lot of context, and they start thinking about things, right? Youngsters don't have that kind of exposure yet because they are still early in their careers. So they run with it, they have fun with it. But I think the deeper reflections happen when you play with senior teams, is what I have seen. And you don't need to go all out, right? You can start with certain aspects of improv and start small, and as Shanti and I were also discussing, maybe give certain snippets of how it works. So I think that helps, right? So for senior leader development, I would say you can use it for advanced skills like building overall organizational culture, let's say for creativity or innovation, those kinds of things, building cross-functional alignment between teams. It works really well there. I think those are some use cases where you can think about introducing improv at a slightly senior level. How do you integrate it? I think again, different ways of doing it. You can integrate it as a standalone facilitated session for the audience that you're working for. You can also integrate it to a larger people development program that you may be running. It can also be integrated there. That's at a slightly higher level. But on a day-to-day basis, let's say if you have a 6-hour, 8-hour kind of a workshop, I wouldn't, especially if you're doing it for the first time, I wouldn't, keep a full day's workshop right up front. Maybe test it out for half a day, along with something else that you may already have, right? Maybe you have a section on feedback skills, for example. So maybe the first half can be improv and the second half can be feedback, just as an example. So I would suggest that you integrate it with what you're already doing and see how it goes. I have also done full day sessions with leaders, and it has gone really well. But then again, it really depends on why you're doing it, what you're doing it for, etc. So that's how I would think about it.
Interesting perspectives.
Thank you.
We are out of time, but I will still check in if there is any last question before we thank Subbu. Going on. With that, thank you so much. I enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure the audience will enjoy too. I am definitely going to purchase the book, read it. This is the second time I'm hearing about this book, so very intrigued knowing more about what inspired you to write the book, and the fact that it has true lived experiences really motivates me, and I'm going to join your podcast. Take care, and I look forward to having you again sometime. I know there's something on the cards that I'm not supposed to mention, but I will come back very soon. Take care.
All right. Thank you so much, Shanti. Pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.